Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, a warm welcome to our Mainau Palace here in our White Hall today for the prize ceremony. Please get ready for me to hold a speech for at least 1.5 hours because I don't have to wear a mask, so I'm going to take the chance to breathe clearly. No worries. First of all, I want to thank you all to come here, because on Mainau we have the saying that if the weather is bad, it's our responsibility, and if the weather is good, it's the responsibility of our guests. So thank you very much. And since we have this ceremony here on Mainau, every year the weather was wonderful, so please come more often. And third, because before I start, it is so good to see the White Hall full with people. I remember last year it was so sad. There was maybe a third part of you could come because of Corona, and now the White Hall is full again, and it makes me really happy, and it's so nice to have you all here. Today, EuroNatur has his prize ceremony. And the prize ceremony, you know all, goes to 3 people, but it goes on behalf of, and I have to say this once because I really had to look it on the website, Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Science. I think you could have chosen a little easier title, but IPBES is good as well. So, dear Dr. Kelemen, dear Dr. Shin, dear Professor Settele, a warm welcome, especially to you today, and it is a privilege to have you here. A warm welcome as well to the president of EuroNatur, Dr. Thomas Pottas, and his presidium. Warm welcome to you as well. Yes. And of course, a warm welcome to the CEO of EuroNatur, Gabriel Schwaderer. Also to you, a warm welcome. Diversity is a big thing in our days. Diversity in gender, diversity in ethnicity, and of course, diversity in biology. So once again, EuroNatur showed that they found a topic which is so important, not only for nature, but also for culture and our society. And in the beginning, I have to tell you a very sad story, because my family, and in particular my big sister Bettina, is responsibility for the loss of biodiversity. And this is 40 years ago. And we had a little hut in the forest. So we were spending there Sunday in the morning, and my sister Bettina was sitting on the floor in the forest, and my mother was doing the barbecue, and she was looking, what is Bettina doing there? So she was poking in the ground, and then, so she was eating ants. So we are so sorry that we were killing so much ants in this time. So we decided, because it was so bad, we had to do something here on the island to keep up with this. So what we did, beside of everything else, what we do is we have an insect garden here on the island, and we have orchards on the mainland where we produce our apples and our pears and different things where we can provide a good environmental for wild bees, other bees, and all the insects necessary for us all. And one more thing, my father, Count Leonard, he was one of the first persons I've met who was really protecting the environment already. And he said, when you want to protect the environment, you have to make a choice which state you want to preserve. So you want to preserve the state which you have now, then you have to work on it, or you want to let it just go, and then you get it what it was in the time before, but this is going to take maybe 300-400 years till you come back to the state. So I think this is very important for us all to always think when we want to preserve something, we have to make a choice which state we want to preserve. So now I'm looking forward to a very interesting and special evening. The prize ceremony of EuroNatur is one of my all-time favorite. On Mainau, it's always a very, very interesting, very enjoyable and good evening with interesting people, good talks, and new contacts you can make. So take the chance after the prize ceremony to meet as many people as you can and keep up the talking and then enjoy yourself. And thank you very much.
Hello, good evening. Dear Count Björn, dear members of the Presidential Committee and of the Advisory Board of EuroNatur, dear former EuroNatur Award winners Gudrun Steinacker, Ulf Müller-Helmbrecht, Ernst Paul Dörfler, and dear representatives of Malta, dear Mrs. Rievenherm, President of the Federal Agency for Nature Conservation, dear donors, dear friends of the EuroNatur Foundation, dear ladies and gentlemen. Usually our president, Professor Dr. Thomas Pothast, would welcome you. However, as he is going to give the laudation, I have the great pleasure and privilege and honor of welcoming you here myself. First of all, we would like to thank all of you who have made this real-life meeting happen. So many thanks to our host, Count Björn Bernadotte, the Mainau team of Sabine Neufang, the technical team that is broadcasting the event, and the staff of EuroNatur. And having said all this, we would now like to welcome you, the scientists, the delegation representing all the IPBES researchers to whom we will be awarding the EuroNatur Award today, Dr. Eszter Kelemen, Dr. Yunne-Jai Shin, and Professor Dr. Settele, who's accompanied by his wife, Professor Dr. Josef Settele. You, the scientists, are the heart and soul and mind of IPBES. And you have to, as Count Björn said, take a deep breath before you actually read out what this abbreviation means. They are the scientists of the, as you said, Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. The IPBES was established in 2012, and it is affiliated to the United Nations system. And with the UN family, you are a relatively young member. But in a way, we have all been eagerly awaiting your initiative because it was and still is so badly needed. The scientists work at the interface between science and politics. They collect and provide the numbers, the knowledge, and their expertise needed to make sustainable Earth policy. And Thomas Pothast will explain in a moment how you actually do this, what impact it has, and which dimension it reaches. At first glance, you, the researchers, seem to fall outside the scope of our usually honorees. The last 3 honorees, for example, were people and groups who have fought in a very concrete way, physically and on the ground, against the destruction of nature and the environment. The activist Roberto Eble, for instance, who fights to liberate rivers, or the brave women of Krušica who prevented the construction of a dam with solidarity and strength, or the people of Malz, who are resisting the pressure of the chemical and agricultural lobbies and who fight for ending the use of pesticides in their community and beyond. And by the way, this is unusually, but let me briefly recommend a TV documentary which will be aired tomorrow night. You can find it in the Mediathek of the ZDF, the film project Gegengift, so Against Poison, actually started at last year's award ceremony when Volker Andres met the Malz people here on the Mainau island. So we have a very fine product after 1 year. This time our prize goes to the scientists who compile data worldwide, who correlate it, who put it into a global context and above all make it available to us. Not only are you, the scientists, enabling policymakers to get the reliable data they need for negotiating the future, but you are also explaining to us exactly what the biodiversity crisis we are facing is about, what it means for the global community and ultimately for each of us personally. You are opening our eyes to life's big picture and also to the microscopically small, to the commons of the living. With your very inclusive, transparent, motivating and inspiring and understandable communication of science, you're also countering rampant scientific skepticism and political short-sightedness. It's not easy these days to be a scientist, especially a public scientist. It takes courage. And this alliance of scientists has taken on a huge task, and for this you have our utmost respect. And we will now move over to listen to some more music. You all probably realized that it was Gone with the Wind, the first one we heard. And now we'll move over to the Earth Song composition by Michael Jackson.
Esteemed festive assembly, dear colleagues, dear friends. With great respect and pleasure, the board of EuroNatur Foundation has nominated the scientists working with the IPBES, also dubbed World Biodiversity Council or Weltbiodiversitätsrat, for the EuroNatur Award 2021. I am very happy to present the award to Dr. Eszter Kelemen from Hungary, Dr. Yunne-Jai Shin from France, and Professor Josef Settele from Germany on behalf of the whole worldwide international community of scientists working for and with IPBES. This is to honor your outstanding engagement for the protection of biodiversity and the environment and the transformation towards global sustainable development. The laudation starts with some brief and well-known information about the reasons and the motivation why we are all here, the threatened state of biodiversity. Then I provide a very short sketch on the structure and work of IPBES and the achievements of the works of our esteemed guests and the IPBES scientists community. And finally, I would like to end with some remarks on the current context and prospects of science, politics, and biodiversity. First, biodiversity in crisis. What is it? What makes us concerned about biodiversity, ecosystem services, the biosphere as a whole? It's the ongoing loss of species and habitats that regrettably has been an issue for almost 150 years now, ever since the pioneers of nature conservation have been starting to push this loss into the focus of society and politics. And ever since, the situation has not really improved. To the contrary, we are now facing an encompassing global crisis of biodiversity, human activities related with resource-intensive, extractivist, and globalized imperial ways of life have directly altered 3/4 of the land worldwide. Also, 2/3 of the upper ocean layer is increasingly suffering from these effects. About 85% of wetlands have been lost since the year 1700, and 3/4 of all rivers over 1,000 kilometers long no longer freely flow from source to sea. Coastal ecosystems are experiencing some of the largest and most rapid declines in recent times, and we all know about the situation, the threatening situation of the coral reefs, which are likely to disappear maybe within this century if climate change is not immediately and strongly curbed. Every 10 minutes, a species becomes extinct, and the speed of extinction is 10 to 100% faster than the natural extinction rate. I stop here with these well-known and depressing bad news. Why does all this matter? Why do people care about nature and the decline of our fellow living beings? The answer is threefold. Firstly, we care because human life, as we know it, can only be maintained if and only if biodiversity and ecosystem services are maintained in a way that allows for mutual coexistence. The current biodiversity crisis is threatening this in an existentially relevant way. Secondly, as part of human flourishing, we relate to biodiversity, all of us, in various and culturally different ways, and we do this interaction with biodiversity for our good life, also beyond questions of mere biological survival. Recently, colleagues have dubbed this dimension of human-nature relations cultural ecosystem services. In other parts of our planet, people rather talk about buen vivir or sumak kavsai or Ubuntu to characterize a life of living together of humans, fellow species, and nature as a whole. And thirdly, humans cherish and respect biodiversity and nature simply because the latter have an intrinsic value in their own right, beyond any human interests and beyond direct functional aspects. So it's not only about the facts of declining biodiversity, it's also about the values. And only in and by this combination of factual knowledge and value knowledge, it is why we care and act against the biodiversity crisis and for the sake and flourishing of biodiversity. IPBES. Compared to the long history of nature conservation, IPBES is a young institution, Anna just alluded to that, yet it has a fascinating background of its implementation. It has to be understood, as I think, from a context dating back to the United Nations World Commission for Environment and Development established in 1983, and the famous report of 1987, Our Common Future. This so-called Brundtland report established sustainable development as an ethical and political principle of justice, justice between all living humans as well as among future generations, the priority of the needs of the poorest, and the need to take into account the environmental and planetary boundaries that allow and limit the way how human flourishing can be practiced. The United Nations Summit in Rio de Janeiro 1992 then set the Agenda 21 for Sustainable Development and issued, among others, the Convention on Biological Diversity, CBD, which one was becoming the major global political framework for nature protection as part of sustainable development. IPBES itself has been established based on the so-called Busan outcome as a part of the CBD follow-up processes. Busan in South Korea was the location of the, I quote, third ad hoc intergovernmental and multi-stakeholder meeting on an intergovernmental science policy platform on biodiversity and ecosystem services, end quote. So this is where the name comes from, international negotiations. Subsequently, participating states at their plenary meeting in April 2012 adopted a resolution that established IPBES as an independent intergovernmental body with a seat of the Secretariat located in Bonn, Germany. The first session of IPBES took place in January 2013, so it took more than 20 years from CBD to IPBES. As all of you might know, IPBES is following the idea of another body, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, short IPCC, founded already in 1988, and it was hoped that IPBES would achieve a similar standing and impact as IPCC as, and this is the important thing, a reliable source of scientific information for global environmental policymaking. Although legally independent, IPBES is administered by the United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP, and has a set of precise institutional arrangements, functions, structures, and processes. They provide a complex framework of rules, principles, and procedures to govern the platform's work. This is important, that we have rules and guidelines so people are not just doing what they want as influential persons, but they are embedded in this structural procedural guidelines. Let me very briefly try to explain this, and maybe I'm wrong, and please correct me if I do so. The IPBES was established in 2012 by close to 100 participating governments, nation states, and its membership has continued to grow as IPBES impact has increased. The Bureau is an important thing. The mandate of the Bureau is set out in the functions, operating principles, and institutional arrangements of IPBES. The Bureau consists of 10 members. The current chair is Ana Maria Hernandez Salgar, a leading international relations environmental expert from Colombia. Past chair has been Robert Watson, an eminent environmental scientist and ecosystem services expert from England. Secretariat. The Secretariat, based at the United Nations campus in Bonn, Germany, is the only permanently located structure of IPBES. The Secretariat is responsible, of course, for administrative function, and it's coordinating the budget and the outreach activities of the platform. Important for us today might be another body, the Multidisciplinary Expert Panel. Its mandate, among others, is to, and I quote, manage IPBES peer review process to ensure the highest level of scientific quality, independence, and credibility for all products delivered by IPBES at all stages of the process. Second, engage the scientific community and other knowledge holders with a work program, taking into account the need for different disciplines and types of knowledge, gender balance, and effective contribution and participation by experts from developing countries. Just as a side remark, following the Paris 2015 agreement, all countries of the world are developing countries for sustainable development. But what is meant is being clear. And thirdly, explore the ways and means to bring different knowledge systems, including indigenous knowledge system, into the science policy interface. As you see from these three important points, scientific quality as well as ethical and intercultural aspects are coming together to provide information on the state of biodiversity and ecosystem services. IPBES already has had an enormous impact on the way how this is being done by its conceptual framework from 2015. This framework includes 6 interlinked elements constituting a socio-ecological system that operates at various scales in time and in space. First, nature. Second, nature's benefit to people. Third, anthropogenic assets. 4, institutions and governance systems and other indirect drivers of change. 5, direct drivers of change. And 6, good quality of life. Why is this so important? Because this framework, and in this framework, biodiversity is based on, but not restricted to, knowledge from natural science, but entails social sciences and humanities, as well as indigenous and other sources of expertise. The expertise produced is controlled by a meticulous and again complex review process, which includes not only scientists, but civil society stakeholders and governments. By this, information on the global state and possible futures of biodiversity is provided in an interdisciplinary as well as transdisciplinary way. Scientists are part of a science policy interface to provide information that is both state-of-the-art and high quality, as well as relevant for policymaking. Now how, and this is my third part, how do scientists work in and for IPBES? They are nominated by their nation states. They devote a considerable amount of their working time, often 20%, one workday per week. The lead authors even more, to IPBES. And the review, what are they doing? They review the existing bodies of knowledge. And this is a very hard and tedious task. The 2019 Global Assessment Report of the IPBES in its published version comprises roughly 1,200 pages, and it's even more if you go to some additional material. And as Josef Settele, one of the 3 coordinating lead authors of the report, reports in his recent book from 2020, and I've taken it from your book, Sepp, about 500 researchers from 50 countries have been involved as co-authors. In a 3-year process, innumerable publications have been screened by a systematic keyword search. More than 15,000 publications have been chosen as relevant, and they have been scientifically assessed, condensed, and brought into policy-relevant context, and then communicated in an understandable form. The review process of producing the report also contained 20,000, as Josef notes, I quote, more or less critically constructive, quote, end comments from science, society, and politics. It is precisely this work that we want to highlight by the EuroNatur Award 2021. All the scientists are experts of their respective fields, but what they contribute here is not their own research, but a synthesis of all the best available knowledge with regard to the biodiversity crisis. This form of knowledge production requires not only the scientific virtues of impartiality, exactness, critical analysis, and self-reflection, but also the art of finding the relevant knowledge in almost a limitless universe of digitalized information. On focusing on the important issues and putting them into context, and of balancing different needs of quality and quantity and kind of knowledge at and for the science policy interface. From colleagues I know who are working with IPBES, I know how high also the intrinsic personal motivation is and has to be to contribute to such a complex work. Let me illustrate the impact of IPBES work by a few outcomes. I have already mentioned the influential conceptual framework. I have also mentioned the really influential 2019 global report, and it has become influential again in 3 different ways. It first showed the disastrous state of affairs on global scale and identified the direct and indirect drivers of biodiversity loss. And I cannot go into technical details here. Second, and equally important, it offers detailed scenario elements for, and I quote, plausible futures of nature, its contributions to people and their good quality of life. And Yunne-Jai Shin has been one of the 3 coordinating lead authors of this chapter. And thirdly, the report has been providing, and I quote again, options for decision makers. And Eszter Kelemen has been one of the lead authors of this chapter. And this last chapter, Options for Decision Makers, stresses the importance of societal transformations also regarding a sustainable economy, including issues of taxing, consumption, and trade regimes, among many others. This chapter very aptly addresses biodiversity and ecosystem function as part of the full spectrum of topics relevant for sustainable development as a whole. So biodiversity issues, which they are not as often and wrongly stated a seemingly sectoral issue. This all-encompassing. In the same vein, this year, IPBES and IPCC issued a workshop report on the interlinkage between climate crisis and biodiversity crisis. Maybe this interlinked problem might be the most important task for future policymaking, not telling apart these 2 crises, although powerful players try to do so in order to weaken both climate protection and biodiversity protection. But to the contrary, we need to integrate these 2 perspectives. I am aware that I missed to address very many important other aspects. The regional, which is more or less continental specifically, assessments, the reports on land degradation, on pollination, and many more. But allow me to proceed to some final remarks in order not to waste too much time. Although, Graf Björn, you're right, it's nice to stand here without a mask and talking to all these nice people. So anyway, I will keep myself short. Of course, not by coincidence, but following a secret hidden plan, this award comes with perfect timing, not only with regard to the weather, but this week at Kunming, China, the 15th Conference of Parties of the Convention on Biological Diversity is taking place. Yesterday, the high-level segment of COP15 closed with the adoption of the Kunming Declarations, where parties to the conventions committed to develop, adopt, and implement an effective post-2020 global biodiversity framework that would put biodiversity on a path to recovery by 2030 at the latest, and towards the full realization of a 2050 vision of living in harmony with nature. Critically, the framework would also include the provision of the necessary means for implementation, in line with the convention and other protocols related to that, as well as appropriate mechanisms for monitoring, reporting, and review. So, the landmark post-2020 Global Diversity Framework is due to be adopted at Part 2 of the UN Biodiversity Conference in May 22, following earlier negotiations in January. And I want to stress that IPBES and the scientists of IPBES have been part of preparing this state of international biodiversity politics. Now we need to see whether this political and financial practice of implementation of an ambitious agenda is really taking place. So this is the next step. We have the information, we have the plans, we have the political agenda, and now we need to see whether it's financially and politically really put on the ground. We are going to see what's happening. Some people might think that the information on declining biodiversity, destruction of habitats and ecosystem services, the identification of drivers and the socio-economic backbone of these processes, and the need for global societal transformations towards sustainable development are no new things. Well, that's right. But this view that we all know this for more than 50 years is missing important perspectives. Let me name 3 of them. First one, scientific information is not timeless truth, but it's subject, and it must be subject to constant critical revision, so that we need continuous state-of-the-art reviews and updates. And this is precisely what IPBES scientists are contributing to. Second, based on this scientific information, also need to be contextualized in a problem-oriented way by including civil society and governmental actors to form a formal process to provide the documents that IPBES is providing. Because it's not only scientific reports, but it's a combination of the scientists' work, the civil society interventions, and of course the political bodies of the nation states which contribute to IPBES. And thirdly, scientific information has to be made available at the science policy interface in a transparent and understandable way. For all this, the community of scientists working for IPBES stand in. Allow me to add a personal remark, also being a scientist. It's precisely not the motto and the outdated motto, speaking truth to power, and neither, sorry friends, it's neither follow the science, but it's science and civil society and decision makers, the latter hopefully democratically legitimized, talking and interacting with each other in order to address the biodiversity crisis and discuss sustainable ways out. And again, this is how IPBES works, and this is why we want to award the scientists today. Eszter Kelemen, as a Hungarian socio-economist, Yunne-Jai Shin, as a French marine scientist with family roots in Korea, and Josef Settele, as a German terrestrial ecologist, and if I dare say with Bavarian roots. You stand in for the whole community of scientists of IPBES with a diversity of disciplines and countries, and the presence today of 3 European representatives simply has a pragmatic and also travel sustainability reason. Your work as scientists for and within IPBES enables policymakers to better understand the complex mechanisms and more effectively address the ongoing loss of biodiversity. By providing information on the status and of possible future scenarios of biodiversity, whilst remaining scientifically independent and transparent, your work is relevant in and for politics. Explicitly, your work shall be understood as not being directly prescriptive, but at the same time you clearly speak up for the preservation of nature and sustainable development, thereby showing your personal commitment as global citizens for human-nature partnership. That is why your work is more motivating than ever for our commitment for a sustainable shared future of humans and fellow living beings and the biosphere. Thank you very much. So please allow me to just say one word, and since this event is being streamed, all scientists working for IPBES are laudated by this, and we are very happy that you three are here. And what we also have prepared is some kind of another document which is generic without single names, and we are going to send this maybe to Bonn, and of course every of the few thousand scientists working with IPBES will have at least an electronic copy of this award on their computers. So again, thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for your work with IPBES for biodiversity and sustainable development.
Dear Assembly, dear ladies and gentlemen, allow me a few words. I'd like to thank you. Thank you, EuroNatur, for this award. It's a great honor for IPBES. And I must say it's a great honor for me to be able to represent the IPBES scientific community from which I learned so much. The IPBES has triggered a real change in perception of the role of biodiversity in our quality of life. And I would like to say a few words to the young people who are, for some of them, revolted because they have an acute perception of the biodiversity crisis. And some of them end up thinking that assessments, such as the IPBES assessments, are not useful anymore because our world seems to be governed by other interests. And I would say that we must never give up. Because if the kind of assessments that IPBES does didn't exist, if the science would stop, if actions such as those triggered by EuroNatur didn't exist, then the situation would be even worse today. So IPBES work shows that we have the means and some keys to change our trajectory for a better future, which means living more decently, living more equitably, and in harmony with nature. And we can build the foundations of this world for our children. And the scenarios that we're talking about and the models of IPBES also show that we are currently in a decade where acting in the right direction is more urgent than ever. Nelson Mandela said that sometimes it falls on a generation to be great. And we, collectively, individually, can be that great generation. that generation of change. And I know that IPBES in this context will continue tirelessly to work to provide the best science as possible to support the critical decision-making that is needed to stop the biodiversity loss, and thus to ensure, to secure the good quality of life of the future generations. Thank you.
Dear Assembly, dear ladies and gentlemen, my heart is full with warmth and gratitude to be able to stand here on behalf of all the scientists, all the community behind IPBES. So just please imagine a huge bunch of people with us here, having different colors, different scientific backgrounds, speaking different languages, being both women and men, having children, having grandparents, and donating some of their time to work on these reports prepared by IPBES. I am really grateful to be part of this community. Sometimes I also feel it's kind of a second family for myself. And I feel that this award cherishes this diversity of the people within IPBES. And it is not possible, I feel it is not possible to really respect and recognize the diversity of nature without recognizing the diversity of our human cultures and our own friends and colleagues. So in this sense, this award really helps us to show how these differences across cultures can really brought together and bring common ground, create shared values, which help us continue the safeguarding of our biodiversity and life on Earth. Thank you very much.
So famous last words. Thank you very much for awarding this to the whole community of IPBES scientists. And I would say scientists include also maybe citizen scientists as well. So it's a broader community, not only the hardcore science people. Maybe one hint for you to keep the name in mind. If you think about, in German, it's Schluck auf, it's IPBES. That's how you can keep in mind the name, how it's pronounced in the right way. And it's not complicated. I mean, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is also not much less complicated, but you learned how to say IPCC. And IPBES is just an agreement we had with the people in Bonn, actually, with Robert Spoll, who's doing the PR for the IPBES, with Anne, who is the secretariat in Bonn. Then I want to mention He and Go, which was a good soul for the entire process, taking care of everybody. He knew everybody among these 2,000 or 3,000 people. That's amazing. I also want to mention some other colleagues working there. It's the whole team actually in Bonn. And also Bob Watson, who led us for quite some time. And now Anna doing this from Colombia as the new head of IPBES, so to say. Just to mention, well, my background is not only Bavaria. Ich komme aus Bayerisch Schwaben, it's just around the corner. So, Markt Oberdorf, falls jemand das kennen sollte, da, wo die schönen Traktoren herkommen. Okay, and that's also one of the things I like very much in this work, to be linked also to lots of, let's say, initiatives on the ground, which you need to be successful. So linking up to farmers, linking up those people who run the globe, those people who make decisions and who make decisions for the good or the bad. But they're all decisions which are done partly on our behalf. So we are the ones driving the whole thing, we as society. So there's nobody to blame, or we are all to blame actually in the end about the situation in which we are. But there's a doom and gloom part. So I would rather say, well, we are all quite optimistic, otherwise we wouldn't do this job. It's a kind of great pleasure to work on a global community. To give you some ideas about knowledge out there, so for example, if you take pollination, there are around 200,000 publications at the moment about pollination alone. So the 15,000 mentioned by Thomas, that was a kind of the selection after a long process of just the core papers which we used for this assessment. But the whole thing is, that's the tricky thing, to bring down all the messages, all the information which is there on the, let's say, in a kind of form which is digestible in policy making. And I think we have learned a lot also from our colleagues, working with all of them in the process. It was a steep learning curve for everybody involved in the process. And it's really a nice, big family, a very global family. As you mentioned before, we have 50 countries in the global assessment, 150 course offers. and around 350 additional contributing authors. So it's a 500 authors team just working on this one document, where the essence is only on 40 pages. And by the way, it's not available in German language since last week, so you can download it from the IPBES homepage. There's a German version of the summary. It took us 2 years to get this German thing going because it's a matter of language also to translate things. English is a quite easy language, so things are not so detailed, not so exact. But if you translate it into a language like French or like German, it's more complicated. So it's available. Make use of it. And what I always say is, these things are out there. They're agreed by all the governments of IPBES. At that time it was 135, I think it's 140 at the moment, roughly. So it was a consensus document. So all governments have agreed on this. So you can use it for your civil activities to say, okay, that's what you have been agreeing on as German government, Austrian, Switzerland, most EU countries, and many big players in the globe, USA, India, China, Brazil, Argentina, you name it. It's all across the globe. So thank you very much for the prize. I'm honored to take this prize, the three of us, on behalf of the whole community of scientists in the broadest sense. And nice to have you all here and to be there in person again. And we hope we also can overcome the other biodiversity crisis, which is called COVID-19. Thank you.
Well, now it's up to me to simply say thanks again to you, the scientists of IPBES, and to all of you who made this possible. Thank you for coming, as simple as that, being here and celebrating with us. And a huge big thank to the musicians, Stefanie Jürgens and Axel Bernhard, who actually proved that there is a lot of biodiversity in music too. Thank you for this excellent program. And now we will end our celebration with the event with another piece of music, and we invite you for the reception. Thanks a lot.
Our actions determine our future. We believe in the coexistence of humans and nature in harmony. We work together across borders. We lead projects all over Europe to protect precious wildlife and habitats. We support people in their demand for change. We are EuroNatur.